Hey, what's going on, guys? So lately I've been dabbling with OpenAI and some of the tools that are available, which are really incredible. So you probably heard about the Chat GPT model that has been trained to basically have conversations, and you can ask all types of questions, including coding questions, and it gives you some really great in-depth answers. And you can also make references to things you've already talked about. It's really cool, and I'd suggest people try it out. But that's not what this video is about. What I want to do in this video is create a web app that we can enter some text into, and it's going to generate an image based on that text. And we're going to be able to do that using OpenAI's DALL-E system, which can, as you can see, create realistic images and art from a description in natural language. So if you put like, give me a frog on a computer drinking coffee, it'll generate that image, and it'll create it from scratch using machine learning and AI. So this is the app we're going to build, and we're using Node.js. So we're going to have a Node backend where we use the OpenAI Node package, and then the front end will just be HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript. And if you want to use a framework, of course you can do that. But if we put in here, what did I say? A frog on a computer drinking coffee. And then you can choose a size as well. So let's click generate, and it just takes a couple seconds. And there we go. So we get a frog drinking coffee on a computer. If I click generate again, it'll give us another one, something completely different. And it's not like it's going out and finding this image on the internet. It's creating it from scratch based off of machine learning and AI. So really, really cool. So let's go ahead and jump into VS Code or whatever editor you're using. And I'm going to open up my terminal. Now you do have to have Node.js installed. So if you don't have that, just go to nodejs.org and download it. And then we're going to run npm init-y, which will create a package.json file. So as far as the dependencies we need, we want to install Express because we're going to create a route and so on. And then we want the OpenAI library. And then I'm also going to install .env for our environment variables. And one of those environment variables is going to be our API key, which I'll show you how to get in a few minutes. Now I also just want to install as a dev dependency NodeMon, just so we don't have to keep restarting it. And then let's go into our package.json, and I'm just going to create a start script. So set that to start, and then let's do npm node index, which will run the index file. That's what I'm going to call it. And then let's go ahead and also create a dev script, and that will run nodemon in our index file. Okay, so now we'll create that index file. So index.js, and then for now I'm just going to do a console log 123, and then let's run npm run dev, and that should run nodemon, and you should see the 123. All right, so we can clear this with Command or Control C, and now we can start writing our code. So we're going to start off by just creating a very simple Express server. So let's bring in, let's say const express, and we want to require Express, and we'll bring in .env as well. So let's say .env, but we do have to call the config method. That's how this package works. So let's say .env, and then we can create a .env environment. Let's actually do that now. So we'll say new file .env, and let's put our port in here for now, which I'm going to set to 5000. And then to get our port, let's set that to process.env, and then we want to get that port value. Or if that's not there, then still 5000. All right, now let's initialize Express. So we'll say app equals Express. And I know a lot of you guys already know this stuff, but I like to do things from start to finish and explain things as I go along. So, I mean, you can skip around. I will put timestamps in. So we want to just start, let's say app.listen, and let's pass in our port, and then have a function, just do a quick console log, and we'll say server started on port, and then we'll put our port variable in there. All right, so just with that, we should be able to run npm run dev. Okay, so that starts the server. I'm going to stop that for a second because I want to add in our API key. So we're going to call this let's call it OpenAI underscore API underscore key. And where you can get that is at beta.openai.com. And then over here, of course, you have to log in, create an account, log in, and then view API keys. And here you can create your keys. All right, so I'm going to just grab the one that I've been using. Let's see, I have that all over to the side here. And, don't use this key because I'm going to delete it after. Make sure you create your own. So we'll save that. And now we should be able to run the server and let it run with NodeMon. So as far as the structure, you could put everything in the index.js, but I don't like to do that. I don't want it to be too cluttered and messy. So I'm going to make it kind of scalable. So if you do want to add more stuff from OpenAI, you can pretty easily. So what I'm going to do is create a routes folder. And in routes, we're going to have a file called OpenAI routes.js. Okay, and then back in the index.js, I'm going to connect that. So let's say app.use. And for the route/OpenAI, I want to require that file. So we want to go ./routes/OpenAI routes. So in the routes file, let's bring in express because we need to use the router. So we'll say require express. And then let's create the router. So we want to do that with express.uppercase R router. And then we want to make sure we export that. So module exports router. And then the only route we're going to create is going to be for a post request. So let's say router.post. And it's going to be /GenerateImage. So ultimately, what we want to hit is going to be /OpenAI/GenerateImage. And we're going to have a controller function, but for now, I'll just put a regular anonymous function in here. So let's say request response. And for now, we'll just do a res.status 200 and JSON, and we'll just pass in an object with, let's say, success, and set that to true. Okay, so I'm going to make a request now, and I'm using Postman. Now, if you want to use a different tool, that's fine, but you just have to be able to make post requests. And I'm going to pass in, I actually already have it right here. So again, it's going to be localhost 5000 OpenAI/GenerateImage. And you should see a 200 response and success true. So now, like I said, I want to have a controller function. So let's create a new folder called controllers. Or, no, yeah, I don't want controller. Let's call it controllers. Okay, and then inside that, we'll create a new file, and let's call that OpenAI controller.js. All right, so in here, this is where we're going to do, we're going to use the OpenAI library and so on. So let's start off by just creating our function. I'm going to call it GenerateImage, and I'll use an arrow function. And this is going to be asynchronous because the OpenAI library is going to give us a promise. So let's say async, and let's pass in our request and response. And then for now, I'm just going to go ahead and grab this, paste that in there, and we have to make sure that we export this. So module.exports an object with GenerateImage. All right, then we can go ahead and bring that in here. Let's say const, we're going to destructure GenerateImage from the, let's go up one level to controllers, and then OpenAI controller. And then instead of this anonymous function here, I'm going to replace that with GenerateImage. And we should get the same response. Good. All right, so now that we're done with that crap, we can start to use this library. So if I go to the GitHub page right here, basically there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do. Like this one, you can see they're calling create completion. The method we want to call is create image, but this stuff is all the same, setting up the config. So I'm just going to copy that, and then let's see, let's just do this. So then we're going to go ahead and put that, let's put it above the generate image. And then you can create other functions if you want to do other things. So this is where we're actually passing in our OpenAI key. So make sure that this matches whatever is in your .env, this right here. Okay, make sure you have the correct key. So in the generate image, I'm just going to cut this response for now, and we're going to do this inside of a try catch. And we want to create or get a response and put it into a variable. So the way we do this is we await on OpenAI dot, and you can see there's a ton of methods. We're going to use create image, and that takes in an object, and we need a couple things here. So one is the prompt. That's going to be the text that you want to describe your image, and ultimately this will come from a form from the front end, but for now I'm just going to put in, let's say, polar bear on ice skates, or whatever you want to put. And then we have an n value, and what that is the number of images. I'm going to hard code that to 1. If you want, you can have an input on your front end where they can select multiple images and you can return multiple images, but we're just going to do 1 for this. So then we also need the size, and for that I'm just going to choose 512 by 512. So, and ultimately from the form they'll select small, medium, or large, and we'll have a conditional that will set it to a certain number of pixels. But for now I'm just going to hard code this. All right, now after the response we're going to create image URL, because that's ultimately what we're going to get, and we can get that from the response dot data, and then dot data again, which is an array. So we want the first item in the array, and then dot URL. Okay, so that'll give us the URL. And then as far as what I want to respond with, let's go ahead and paste that in, and we just want to add to this, I'm going to call this data and set that to image URL. All right, now as far as the error goes, if something goes wrong, let's go ahead and set 400 and set this to false. And I'm going to put message or error or whatever you want, and I'm just going to say the image could not be generated. And basically what's going to fire this off the most, the reason you'll get an error the most, is because of violating the content policy. So for instance, if you type in like people having sex or something like that, it's not going to work. It doesn't do that stuff, at least without setting some kind of flag or whatever. I'm not really sure, but I know if you try to get like porn and stuff, it's not gonna work. So you're gonna get an error, 400 error. All right, now I also want to just console log any errors, and if we go to the docs here and we go to image generation, so basically this is what we're doing right now. There's Node.js, there's also Python. Now in addition to adding or generating images, you can also edit existing images. Like you can see here, you can upload, or you can use a mask and then add something to that image, which I think is really cool. We're not going to do that, but that is possible. You can also create different variations of images. But if we go all the way down, you'll see for error handling, I just want to grab this right here because this will tell us exactly what's wrong. On the front end, they'll just see, the image can't be generated, but we want to know as a developer what is happening. So I'm going to paste that in there. All right, and I think that should do it as far as, we should be able to make a request and get a response with a URL. So let's jump into Postman, or if you want to use something else, that's fine. And let's see, we'll just go ahead and try this out. Now it's going to take a couple seconds. That's actually a good sign. And there we go. So we get success true, and we get this URL. So I'm going to command click, and there we go. We get a freaking polar bear on ice skates. If we do it again, And sometimes it's like a cartoon, sometimes it's like 3D generated. So they're so different. Like you can get something that's so different. So yeah, at least we have our back end working. Now we do, of course, we don't always want to look for a polar bear on ice skates. We want to be able to take in body data from the request. So in order to do that, we need to add a little bit of middleware. So let's go here. Let's say enable body parser. Passer. That's how I would say it. Off video. Try not to, let too much of my accent out. So let's say app.use, and we want to pass in here express.json, and let's also do app.use and then express.url encoded, and we're just going to pass in extended false into this. So extended false. Okay, now we should be able to accept body data, which will come in through request.body. So back in our controller, what we'll do is, let's see, right in the generate image, I'm going to destructure from request.body, and basically we want to be able to take in here a prompt, which is going to be the text, and then also the size. Now the prompt, that's easy. We can just get rid of this, just do that, and that's going to use whatever this is passed in from the form. It's going to use that here. Now for the size, I want to add a conditional, because instead of choosing pixels, I want to just choose a small, medium, or large. So I'm going to do this in a shorthand and use a ternary. So let's say image size, and we'll set that to, let's say, if size is equal to small, then we want this to be, let's say, 256 times 256. Okay, and then if it's, wait a minute, no, we want to do else. Sometimes these long ternaries confuse me. So else we want the size, if the size is equal to medium, then we want this to be, let's say, 512 times 512. Else, then we want the large, which is going to be 1024 times 1024. All right, so that should do it. Now for the size, we can just replace that with image size. All right, so I think that should do it. Let's save, and then let's go back to Postman. Do one final test by adding in, let's go to body and then form URL encoded, or raw JSON if you want. And we want prompt. So prompt is going to be, what should we do? Let's say, we'll say man on the moon. And then let's do the size. Size, we're going to do medium. So we'll go ahead and send that. And let's go ahead and check it out. There we go. So we get a man on the moon sitting in a bucket. All right, cool. So our back end is complete. So now we just need to do the front. Now real quick, I'm just going to do a quick git. Let's say git init. And I'm just going to add a git ignore. You don't have to do this, but I'm just going to say git ignore and say npm underscore modules. And also the .env. I'll probably put like a .env example or something in the repo. So let's come down here and git add all, and then git commit. And I'm just going to say this is the OpenAI backend. All right. So let's run npm run dev again. Now, like I said, if you want to use a framework, you can do that, but I'm just using vanilla JavaScript. So what we're going to do is create a folder here called public, and we want to make that the static folder, so we can just have like an HTML file. We can have our CSS and so on. So let's add the middleware for that. I'm just going to say set static folder. And we can do that. I'm actually going to, excuse me, I'm going to bring in the port. I'm going to bring in the path module. So path equals require path, and then let's come back down here, and we're going to add our middleware. So app.use, and then express.static, and then path.join _dir name, so from the current directory, and then into public, that's going to be our static folder. So now in our public, we can just create an index.html, just put a boilerplate in there, and I'll just say this is, I guess, OpenAI image generator. And let's just say hello, just make sure this works. So now I should be able to go to the browser and go to localhost 5000, and we should see hello. Is this smaller than usual? Okay, so let's see. As far as the CSS goes, I'm gonna copy and paste that in because that's just obnoxious to write. So in public, let's create a folder called CSS. And then in CSS, we're going to create style.css. And I also have a spinner. When we submit the form, you see we had a spinner. So I'm going to put that in a separate CSS file. Okay, now the spinner, I'm going to paste that in. And you can get this from the repo in the description. This is a spinner I found on CodePen, so I want to make sure I put the link to it in there. I did change a couple things around. Basically, we want to add a show class if we want it to display, and just remove the show class for it not to display. So we'll save that, and then I'm going to grab the style CSS. Okay, and just to go through this real quick, we're using the Poppins font. We have a reset. We have the primary color as a custom property, body styles, the nav bar. Then we have the showcase, which is the big yellow area with the form, showcase input, form button, and then the image area where the image shows, as well as the message if there's an error. All right, so pretty simple. And if you want to have a completely different UI, then go for it. But I just wanted something really, really easy. And then as far as the HTML, I guess I'll paste that in. I was going to type it, but that's you guys aren't here for HTML, so I'll just paste it in and go through it. It's pretty simple. So again, we're just including our style sheets. We're including the JavaScript file and the head with defer, and then we have a header with the nav bar. The only link is the link to the docs, the OpenAI Docs. And then in the main area, we have a section with a showcase that has the form. It has an input with the ID of prompt, so that's going to be our text. We have a select with the ID of size, which is going to be small, medium, or large. And then we have the button, and then we have the section for the image, basically just an image with an empty source and an H2 that has nothing in it. So we'll insert stuff in there from the JavaScript. All right, so let's save that. So if we come back over here and reload, we should see our UI. Now, since we're not using React or anything like that, or any kind of build tool, so we do have to reload the page every time we make changes on the client here, which kind of sucks. And there are ways around that, but I don't really want to get into that. So let's go to our front end JavaScript, which I didn't even create yet. So in public, we want a folder called JS. And in JS, we're going to create a main.js file. So the very first thing we'll do is add our event listener to the form. So let's say document.querySelector, and I'm going to select the form, which I believe has an ID of image-form. And let's add an event listener onto that. We're going to listen for a submit. And when that happens, we're going to call a function called onSubmit. Okay, so let's put that at the bottom, and then we'll create a function, say onSubmit, pass in our event object, and we want to prevent the default behavior. And then let's get the data from the form, so we'll do prompt, and let's say document.querySelector, and we're going to select the ID let's just close that up. We're going to select the ID of prompt, and we want the value because that's an input. Whoops, dot value. So I'll copy that down, and we also want to get the size. So there's an ID of size, and set that to size. All right, and then we'll just have a quick validation here with a basic alert. So we'll say if prompt is equal to nothing, then let's just do an alert. If you want to create a custom alert, that's fine, but this is fine. So please add or we'll say just please add some text, and then return. All right, and then for now we'll just do console log and success, just to test this out so far. So if I come over here, remember we have to reload. If I try to submit with no text, I get an alert. If we do frog on a computer drinking coffee and submit, we get success. Actually, we should see if, just make sure we get our prompt and size. Oops, again, we have to reload. All right, cool. So everything's working so far. So now we're going to have a separate function called generate. We'll call it GenerateImageRequest, and that's going to take in the prompt and the size. So we'll create that down here. Now this has to be asynchronous. So let's say async function, and GenerateImageRequest takes in prompt and size. All right, now I do want to I want to show the spinner. Actually, do we have, yeah, we pasted in the HTML, so we must have it. So we have a div with the class of spinner. If I were to add a class of show manually and come over here and reload, you can see now it shows. So we basically just have to do that with our JavaScript when we want to actually show it. So let's create a function underneath here, two functions. So we'll say function show spinner, and we're going to document dot query selector class of spinner, and we're going to add a class, so we can use classless dot add and add a class of show. So that'll show it. Then we'll go ahead and just copy that down, and let's say remove spinner, and then whoops, we just want to remove the show class. All right, so when we generate, we're going to go ahead and do a try catch, and the first thing I'm going to do in here is show the spinner. Okay, then I want to make the request, so we're going to say const response, set that to await a fetch request. The endpoint is going to be slash OpenAI slash generate image. Okay, now we do have to add in some options here, one being the method, because we want this to be a post request. And then let's do, for headers, we're going to set the content type. So let's say content dash type, and set that to application slash JSON. All right, and then under the headers, we're going to have the body. Now the body is going to be the prompt and the size in an object, but I do want to stringify it. So we're going to say JSON.stringify, and then we'll pass in an object with the prompt. So whatever's passed in the form, prompt, and the size. All right, so that's going to be the response. Now, as a lot of you know, with the fetch API, if we get like a 400, then that doesn't automatically throw the catch. So we have to check for that. So right after the response, which ends right here, I'm going to check, I'm going to say if, and there's, on the response object, there's a value for OK. And we want to check to see if we're not OK, because that'll be false if we get a 400 response and not a successful one. So if we're not OK, then first of all, we want to remove the spinner, or that will just stay there. And then we want to throw a new error. And again, I'm just going to have the message of that image could not be generated. All right, and then let's see, we'll go after that if, okay, so this is if there's a problem. If there's not, then we can get the data. So we'll say const data, and we want to await on the response, whoops, on the response.json. Okay, so that should give us our data. So for now, let's just console log the data. And then as far as down here in the catch, I just want to output the message. So let's say document dot query selector. And there's an H2 that has a class of message, MSG. So we're going to grab onto that, and we're going to say text content equals the error, which is going to be this here, okay, if something goes wrong. And then we're going to want to clear both the image. Well, we can do that after, I guess. So for now, let's just test it out, see if we can get the data. So I think we have everything. Oh, one thing we want to do is make sure that once we get the data, we remove the spinner, because this will remove it if there's an error, but we want to make sure we remove it here as well. All right, so let's try this out. Make sure you reload. Search for our good old frog drinking a coffee. Generate. We get our spinner for a few seconds. It's making the request, and there we go. We get success and data. We get our URL. All right, cool. So now instead of just console logging, we want to put it in the DOM, right? So we'll just comment that out, the console log, and let's say const image URL, and we're going to get, so it's going to be data, which is the entire object, but in that object, remember we have a data attribute here, which is going to be the URL. I probably should have set that to something else because this is kind of weird, data.data, but it's fine. So we get our image URL, and then let's grab the image ID, so query selector, and there's an ID of image, and then let's go ahead and set the source to the image URL that we just got from the back end. Yeah, and then we'll remove the spinner. And then what I want to do is just make sure up here, once we submit, we want to clear the message and the image. So that'll be the first thing we do. So let's say document dot query selector, and we want to select the message. So let's say .msg. Probably should have made that an ID. It kind of bothers me, but whatever, it's fine. So text content, and we're going to set that to nothing. And then we also want to get the image. So that's going to be the ID of image. And let's set the source to nothing. All right, so I think that should do it. Let's make sure we reload here and generate. And there we go. And that's going to be 512 by 512 because I chose medium. Let's try something else. We'll say cat with blue eyes and a hat. And let's make that one large. And large images seem to take a little longer. So there we go, cat with blue eyes and a hat. Now, obviously, the more training data it has, the more, the more spot on it's going to be. Where you start to run into issues, like if I type my name in here, there are images of me on the internet, but not a lot. And it takes like all the images and trains, even just logos and all kinds of stuff. So let's see, get some pretty weird results. Okay, so this is like the 10th time I've seen food, and it's always something that's related to bread. So I think it's actually searching for bread instead of Brad. What if we do like Brad Traversy person, web development? I'm kind of treating it like a search engine, which isn't really how this works. All right, so I guess so. I don't know. If we try, let's say Google, like a company that's well known, because companies and names and stuff, it seems to have trouble with. All right, so it doesn't actually say Google, but it comes close with the colors and, the lettering and stuff. So yeah, I mean, what's cool is that these are being created, right? These aren't images that no person actually went in and created this. It's being created by the machine, by code, which I think is really neat. And I think that it's going to get better as time goes on. But let's try something that's kind of easy again. We'll say, I don't know, a cow dancing on a rainbow while juggling. So got a bunch of descriptions in there. See how close it comes. All right, so that's pretty good. So the cow's dancing on a rainbow while juggling. I think that's pretty good. So that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And again, I would encourage you to just mess around with some of the OpenAI tools there. It's really cool and really just cutting edge, a lot of this stuff. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.